Hey, hello, hello.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah. Just as a warning, I'm live, so don't say anything personally revealing or anything.
Okay, it's all good. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Good. How about? Oh, I just said good.
Yeah. Wait, where are you
Uh,
from?
I'm from San Diego, so not too far from you.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, cool. Let me get your camera up. All right, you want to introduce yourself and tell people what you wanted to chat about?
Sure. So my name is Dylan Meisner. I write for a variety of online publications. This interview is going to be for Exponents Magazine, which is the literary arm of the Center for New Liberalism, which is sort of center-left think tank affiliated with the Progressive Policy Institute in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of the neoliberal Twitter account. That's sort of our thing. And r/neoliberal was also like how everything started regarding the new Center for New Liberalism.
Wait, oh my God, I'm actually so dumb. Wait, you guys run the neoliberal Twitter account?
I don't personally, but yeah, it's sort of like the same entity. Yeah.
Wait, the guy that I did an interview with a guy a long time ago, and I thought he was the one that ran that account. Is that possible, or am I totally wrong on that?
No, you're probably right. Was it Jeremiah?
I think so. Yeah. Okay. Just making sure. Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
Jeremiah runs, and he tweets on the account, and he also does the podcast.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Awesome.
And I'm also a college student at San Diego State.
Gotcha. Cool.
Perfect. You ready to get going?
Yeah. Go for it.
All right. So sort of my first question is about sort of online political camps in general. Left of center pundits sort of all sort of fit into different ideological camps and subcamps. Which one do you consider yourself part of, and sort of how do you see the sort of online left sphere?
You're asking me very specifically which camp would I identify with online?
Sort of just among the general online left community.
I would cautiously say I'm pretty sure I would line up most closely with like neoliberal people online. I want to be very careful to draw this distinction because I feel like the online political camps are very disconnected sometimes from the real life political camps. So, for instance, like in real life, I'm very much like a hardline progressive, but online that seems to be something quite different than what it is in the real world. So I just want to be like super clear about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so sort of like sort of within the neoliberal project and neoliberalism online generally, there's sort of an understood split between right neoliberals and left neoliberals. So you would probably consider yourselves like among the left neoliberal.
Very much so, yeah. Although my impression is that online, at least in like the neoliberal subreddit, that subreddit as a whole seems to fall pretty far to the left compared to what a lot of people seem to think neoliberals are. Like neoliberalism seems to be, or at least in my impression, seems to be a lot more associated with like corporatism and stuff than how it presents itself, at least in the subreddit. So yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of this odd dynamic of a label being defined by people who don't actually identify with the label. It's sort of odd. So sort of second question is, what's your general theory of politics? Like, how do you think left of center change should be accomplished?
How do I think change should be accomplished?
Yeah.
That's a really broad question. I guess like the two different like axes I usually look at is you've got like activism and then you've got like political change. I mean, I think that like being an activist in whatever manner that means, so that might mean like going to Black Lives Matter marches, that might mean having a YouTube channel where you talk about issues that are important to you, or shit posting on Twitter to some extent. That type of behavior that like gets people more interested in politics and hopefully encourages them to vote is important. And then the other half is like actually getting political leaders that can affect actual policy change. It is like the second half of that. Both halves of those seem to be very important, with a big focus, for me at least, on the legislative side of things.
Okay, yeah, so that makes sense. So sort of the way I understand that is that that's sort of where your neoliberalism comes out the most, and that you have a lot of progressive goals, but you see sort of existing institutions, the need to work rather with existing institutions as important.
Yeah, without existing institutions, then you're just a LARPer online that shouldn't be talking about politics at all. Yeah. I get very, very, very irritated at people that seem to think that existing institutions are completely irrelevant to all political discourse. It seems to be the ultimate way to make yourself completely and totally politically ineffective, is to ignore the fact that you have to work within political structures to enact any kind of real change.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's a good opinion. So I'm gonna sort of put a quote to you from a recent video. I think this was from your sort of recent Pacman clip that went up on YouTube. You've described some of your left wing critics as quote delusional dumb fucks who are convinced that Biden is just as bad as Trump, end quote. What's your sort of best argument against that specific? I don't want to call it a straw man, but that specific characterization of an argument.
What's my best argument against like me or against people that say that Biden and Trump are the same?
The latter.
I mean, the Democrats and Republicans are just fundamentally different from each other. I mean, like, there are so many different issues that, like, come down to party line votes. So if we're talking about things like healthcare or things like minimum wage or, like, legalization of marijuana, like, a lot of these things, I mean, like, you can just look up, like, how Democrats and Republicans vote on it. Climate change, a lot of these things just fall on party lines. Like, sometimes the politicians don't even matter. It literally can just be, like, the party. Like, if I know that you're a Democrat, I can roughly guess your position on things like LGBT issues, abortion, climate change, minimum wage, immigration. If you're a Republican, I can roughly guess your issues on things like gun rights, pro-life. Like, yeah, like these are decent proxies for a person's political opinion. The idea that both parties are the same just come from like college kids online who only care about like socialism or whatever. In which case, I guess both parties are the same because neither of them are like socialists.
Yeah, no, that's good. What frustrates you the most about sort of online left discourse? I know you have a lot of things that you have a problem with it, but what's like the worst part of it in your opinion?
This applies to alt-righters too, not just lefties online, but actually like I get really irritated at people that just don't have any policies. If I'm talking about like political change, usually what I'm looking at is like, well, what are the most effective policies that politicians can effect in order to enact my political change? And a lot of people just have none. So like the conversations become bogged down into this weird world of like fantasy and theory, and it's just very, very, very fucking boring to me. It's one of the reasons why I stopped talking to like communists in general. Like like it seemed like basically like they're like praying for the revolution or some shit. I don't know, and they don't have like any actual changes that they care about in the meantime.
Yeah, that sort of harkens back to the thing you did with Joshua for Congress and how he had nothing to say about anything he believed in when he was actually president. Yeah. So I think it's sort of fair to say that you use harsh or crude, and so I want to back up for a second. The purpose of the piece that I'm writing in general is I'm going to try and sort of explain the way sort of online inter-left discourse works.
I just spilled a Red Bull.
Oh shit!
Fuck me, dude. I'm so sorry. Give me one.
It's all
second.
good, dude.
Hold on.
Take your time.
All right. Hello.
Hey.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's all good, dude. Did it happen on your keyboard or something?
No, it just was on my my floor mat or whatever.
Okay, it's gonna be all right.
Yeah.
All right. You ready to get back going?
Yeah. Hold on.
All right. I was watching your chat while you were gone. It's fucking insane how fast that goes.
They're just being stupid. This fucking nightstand broken. That's pissing me off. Okay, sorry. Okay, we're good. Go for it.
All right. So the question I was asking was that I think the purpose of this piece is to sort of generally try and explain to sort of normie left neoliberals and neoliberals generally how sort of online left discourse works. A lot of them sort of just see the memes of like what Chapo does and whatever. So I'm just like, I think it's completely fair, and I should note that this isn't like a direct criticism of you only. It's sort of something that's very common among online left debate and such, that you use very crude, harsh language as a debate tactic. Do you see that as a problem, as sort of that it could possibly sort of leave the online space and become a political norm? Do you think that would be a problem?
I mean, well, to some extent. I mean, if you look at people like Trump, it's kind of already become a political norm. I guess he's not necessarily as crude as somebody like me is, but I mean, like, there's always going to be like a space for more like crude political commentary, right? Whether it's somebody like Howard Stern doing a radio program or somebody like me, doing YouTube stuff. Yeah, I mean, that's just a political reality. I think there's a lot of different roles to fill in the online political space. Some people are going to do content like me, where it's more like aggressive, pointed, like debate-related stuff. Some people are going to make videos that are like informational or explanatory, that are like pretty family-friendly. Yeah, I mean, like everybody's got a role to fill, I think.
Yeah, so I think that makes sense. And one thing that you do that you've started to do a lot lately, you did this a lot in the YouTube video that you uploaded with the Surf TV. You've sort of taken on this habit of criticizing your own fans, particularly making fun of them for being, or at least a sect of them for being very white and very leftist. Do you think that that's a tenable business model, I guess, moving forward?
Making fun of my fans or having white fans? Which part?
The first one.
Yeah, I mean, I like people to be aware of, like, I mean, like, online is very different than the real world, and I like people to be aware of that. I think that's an important part. I think that, like, most of my brand is built, like, on being, like, a relatively honest person and a relatively blunt person. I don't sugarcoat anything for my fans or for anybody else, truly. So, I mean, yeah.
So sort of just your brand, you're not going to change?
No, I don't think so. I'm good on that.
All right.
I'm sure it costs me, like, some number of fans at the end of the day, but, I mean, it's whatever. I don't know.
So sort of last specific question, then we'll get into like some general ones about like what's your ideal policy for X general realm or whatever. You've described yourself as being backstabbed by other left-wing commentators. I'm not going to name names, but you can obviously. What was that like, and how does that sort of feel going through that what you've described as betrayal?
I mean, like, I guess like the general gist is that like I kind of it's hard for me to figure out like who really feels or who really means what they say, or who actually like internalizes a lot of the political statements they make online. I like to think that I have like a certain set of beliefs and that I live those beliefs like through and through. Like if I say that I believe in like a certain thing, like people ought to be paid like a certain amount of money or something, like that'll reflect in my business. And in terms of like how I associate with or treat other people, like every time. Or if I think you should hold people accountable for dumb opinions, like that reflects in the way that I associate with people online. I notice that like some of the positions that I have can be like pretty popular to take, but when it comes down to like actually living those or enforcing those like in your personal life, a lot of people just don't. And I guess I get a little bit disappointed. The word that's thrown around a lot is grifters. I guess they're people that basically like they wear a certain political opinion as an aesthetic, and then like discovering that about a person and then having like a big falling out with a person about that, I guess is just kind of frustrating. I don't really take anything personal at this point because it's online shit, but you know.
Yeah, I definitely share that frustration about grifters. Sort of some people from the Neoliberal Project and I started a podcast called The Grifter Report, where we sort of just go talk shit about grifters every weekend. It's good fun. So we're just going to sort of get into like, I'm just going to ask you about like your general policy preferences in terms of general fields. So what's your sort of ideal immigration policy?
Oh man, this is a really broad question. So like from an economic point of view, I'm a big fan of people sorting themselves out in whatever ways are like most economically advantageous towards like all people. So like as an example, if we had like a huge social safety net, I don't think it would be good if people selected the United States based on the types of like welfare they could receive, like stuff like that is not good. But if there's like job opportunities in the United States or opportunities for them to be hired to work in the US, like I think that being able to select for immigration spots like that is pretty good. So I guess like in general, I'm okay with like kind of like a soft-ish, open-ish borders policy where like if people want to move to some place because there's economic opportunities available to them, I think that's good as long as there aren't any like weird incentives set up that makes that somehow like economically disadvantageous. So for instance, somebody moves to the United States just to get a big surgery because we have like universal healthcare and then they leave immediately after, I guess, like roughly speaking like that. I'm also like a more conservative opinion I might have, I guess. I don't feel ultra strongly about this, but I feel kind of strongly about this, and I haven't really been persuaded out of it. I do feel like having some sort of like national language might be an okay idea. Like if we are going to have people coming here and everything, at the very least, like everybody being able to speak English is probably an important part of making that work. It feels like we'd start to become like pretty fragmented, or people would start to become like very upset if you're starting to get like large swaths of the United States where people can't speak English. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. What about what's your ideal healthcare system? You can take this in terms of like what's like an ideal European system that you think we should become more like, or what more broadly do you think healthcare policy should constitute in the United States?
I don't have like a huge opinion between like single payer versus multi-payer systems, but some sort of like guaranteed, whether it's a public option or whether the government is the sole like insurer for health insurance, seems to be the most effective way to go. I'm not aware of any private health insurance systems that any countries use, I think, except maybe like Switzerland, that work well. And it seems like every other European country seems to use some form of like universal health coverage, whether it's multi-payer, like private plus public insurance, or like public option, or whether it's single payer where the government is the sole provider of health insurance.
Yeah, no, I think that's That's a good answer. What about your general sort of foreign policy views?
Um, Foreign policy is really, really, really rough. My dream this is probably not achievable. My dream is that like America just has like an honest foreign policy. I get really irritated when we talk about like going overseas to like free some people or do something because somebody's gassing. Like in general, like America is most interested in, we have like our geopolitical interests that we try to secure for foreign American interests. I think that if we're honest about that, I think I'm a little bit more okay with being, I don't want to say we should be like imperialistic, but I think it's pretty important that America has like some presence in foreign countries, because if we don't, other people will. I just wish we were a little bit more honest about like our objectives, I guess.
Yeah, no, so foreign policy is sort of the thing I generally write about.
Mm-hmm.
And so sort of just to get more specific, like what do you think should have been done about Syria in 2014?
Oh God, that's so complicated. Like, I don't think that like supporting groups inside Syria in the hopes that those groups maybe become powerful enough to knock out Assad, in the hopes that Russia doesn't support him enough, in the hopes that there's not enough fallout. Like the way that we went about that just seemed like so like 1 foot in and 1 foot out, that it was like always bound to be like fucking disastrous. And I mean the blowback from that, you know, that has been felt all across Europe, and to some extent has even undermined, you know, like U.S. authority around the world. Like it's been like such a disaster that I don't know. It's stupid of me to say like we should have just been like full on like get rid of Assad. Like clearly we can't invade, you know, like Syria to get rid of him. Like that probably would have led to a lot of strange global conflict because Russia or Iran would want to be more involved. But I don't think that just trying to like destabilize the fuck out of a country in the hopes that the leader leaves, I don't think that's a very responsible idea either.
Do you think like regime change should have been pursued? Like obviously, like you just took invasion off the table, which I don't think is necessarily. I don't think that's unreasonable, but do you think like regime change should have been the policy from the beginning?
I mean, if that's what we really wanted, then yeah, fuck. Like, I don't know, like just going like doing these like half measure things, it just ends up fucking everybody over, because we basically got a worst case outcome for everything in the Middle East, like, or at least it feels that way, right? We got a massive refugee crisis, we got a quasi failed state, we have, you know, Assad is still in power. Like, yeah, I don't know. It just seems like we didn't really accomplish any good U.S. objectives, and yeah, everything just got fucked.
Yeah, no, I mean that's sort of the foreign policy of the Trump era, in my opinion. So it's just
sure. Although Syria was largely under Obama, to be fair, and the Hillary Clinton State Department, like that. Like I mean, as much as I like to blame Trump for everything, I can't blame Trump for Syria. Like that was very much like a Obama-Hillary blunder, I think.
Well, I mean, I think it was a little bit more complicated than that, because Clinton stepped down in 2013, didn't she? And sort of 2014 was when that shit hit the fan. So that would have been Kerry's State Department. Unless I'm getting the dates wrong, but I think that was it.
Sure. I don't remember exactly when Kerry stepped up, but like the Syrian crisis, the refugee crisis was 2013, right? That was like 2013 is when that happened, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, I mean, I can't blame Trump for Syria. Like that was at the very least, it was an Obama fuck up. Like.
Yeah, but like his sort of general... Like the thing that he's saying is we're only there for the oil. Like he just doesn't care about the humanitarian crisis, and I think that's very problematic to sort of present that face, at least openly, to the world, that like we're basically mercantilists in Syria.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that I don't know, just because of like the U.S. and fracking and everything else going on in the world, I don't know if like oil is like really like the huge reason like why we care about the Middle East. It feels like the more like the stuff going on with Russia and just like having access to that area of the world, and like the economic like transport of like the oil and everything there that other countries are concerned with is more important than just like the U.S. just wants to get oil for itself. I think that feels a little bit like of a naive reading of what's going on there, but.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. What about trade policy? What's your sort of general trade policy outlook?
When it comes to trade, I'm very big on like globalist policy. So like things like the TPP and stuff, like negotiating like multilateral trade agreements, I think it's the only way to bring more economically powerful countries like what China's going to become. I think it's the only way to actually like get them to fall in line with certain ideas. So if we want them to respect our intellectual property, it's probably best to like pressure them via multilateral trade agreements. And I think multilateral trade agreements can be used to pressure countries into a lot of things. So for instance, like I know Vietnam was making like pretty big strides with its worker rights in order to adhere to the TPP, and then they threw all of that out once the U.S. like basically left the negotiations negotiating table for that. And then I also think the amount of influence you get as a country that is involved in these multilateral trade agreements is also good as well. So yeah, I'm a big fan of like multilateral trade agreements, I guess.
Yeah, so you sort of mentioned China. That was actually going to be my next question. Like, what do you think the United States approach should be? Because like everyone sort of understands now that I don't want to say neoliberal policy goals for China, but sort of the general consensus was that if we liberalize trade with China, China will in turn liberalize itself. And like we saw that in terms of markets, right? They're a largely free market economy now. Obviously with a very heavy-handed state, but still mostly capitalist. But we did not see the sort of social liberalism that was billed to follow. What do you think sort of the general, what do you think our general policy towards China should be moving forward?
I don't know enough about like Chinese culture to know whether or not a country like that would ever become economically liberal. I just don't. I would never assume it. I don't know if it's like that seems like a very Western assumption that like, oh, give them enough freedom and they'll want democracy. I don't know if that would be the same, absolutely the case with every single country. So I mean, I would treat China as like, oh well, they're probably always going to be this way, and then we need to act accordingly. Is how I would view it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. How do you think the United States should have treated the coronavirus pandemic when it first rose up? Do you think we should have acted more like South Korea? I think that's a sort of very popular model that we should have followed.
I don't think the U.S. could have gone as hard as South Korea because the United States just wouldn't be willing to sacrifice that much freedom in terms of that aggressive tracing, like using cell phones and stuff. I don't think we ever could have done it. I think the biggest, or it feels to me like the biggest mistake the United States did was not having testing like immediately. Like we can, if we want to be generous, we can say, okay, good job, Trump banned travel from China like relatively early, like congratulations. But like we should have been on our asses after that, getting like testing ready. Like that shit should have been like ready to go hardcore. So that as soon as it started to appear in the U.S., we could have aggressively found the people that had it and then gotten them quarantined and everything.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're more of a fan of like the Germany type approach.
If that's what Germany did, sure. I don't know 100% what their approach.
All right, it's all good. That's sort of all I got. Is there anything you sort of want to address generally?
I don't necessarily think so. Did we miss anything?
No. Looks like all my questions got answered.
Okay, cool.
All right, dude.
Yeah, thanks a lot. You said you're in university now?
Yeah, I go to San Diego State.
Oh, gotcha. Have you been to school recently, or is it all like long distance?
It's going to be all long distance all the way through the fall. I live like a mile away from campus, and so like I go for runs every morning, and I usually like run the stairs at like the parking lots there. So like I'm still on campus every day. It's a ghost town.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, hey, good luck, man. Have fun with your
Thanks, dude.
Stuff. Yeah, and good luck in school. I'll see you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Editor should have gotten a contract. It sounds like you should have gotten something in writing. It sounds like blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's an interesting take there, my fellow communists.